What happens when a man who built his career on mocking the powerful finally comes face to face with someone who refuses to laugh? For more than 3 decades, Bill Maher had made a living doing something most people were too afraid to try. He said the things others whispered. He mocked presidents, challenged activists, and questioned narratives that entire industries built their reputations on. Every week on Real Time with Bill Maher, he sat beneath blazing studio lights and delivered commentary sharp enough to slice through reputations. And he never apologized for it. Not when protests erupted outside studios. Not when networks faced pressure to cancel him. Not when half the internet demanded his head on a digital platter. If anything, controversy only sharpened his smile. But on this particular night, something felt different. The studio was unusually quiet. No audience. No applause. No laughter. Just 2 chairs facing each other beneath cold white lights. The familiar set of HBO's flagship talk show had been stripped down to its bare bones. The polished desk sat unused in the background. The stage felt almost eerie without the usual buzz of hundreds of spectators. It wasn't a normal episode. This was something else. A one-on-one conversation that had taken months to arrange. And the guest walking through the studio doors tonight wasn't just another celebrity promoting a movie or selling a book. She was a former royal. A global headline. A lightning rod for controversy. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex. And she wasn't coming to promote anything. She was coming to confront him. Bill Maher sat relaxed in his chair, legs crossed casually, fingers drumming lightly against the armrest. His expression carried the familiar mixture viewers had come to recognize instantly, half amusement, half skepticism. The look of a man who already knew how the conversation would go. Producers had warned him earlier that afternoon. This one could get tense. Meghan's team had sent over a thick packet of notes. Pages of complaints about things he'd said on television. Jokes he'd made. Observations he'd offered about her interviews, her media deals, her public narrative. Maher never opened the packet. He didn't prepare for interviews that way. He prepared by remembering what people had said publicly, and looking for contradictions. And in Meghan's case, he'd found plenty. A studio assistant quietly adjusted a camera angle. Another dimmed the lights slightly. The room settled into a quiet hum of electronics and air conditioning. Then the door opened. Meghan Markle entered the studio with controlled, purposeful steps. Her posture was upright. Calm. Measured. But the tension in the room shifted immediately. Anyone paying attention could see it. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes sharp. She crossed the studio floor without acknowledging the cameras, without glancing at the crew, and sat down in the chair opposite Maher. Not a smile. Not a greeting. Just silence. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The cameras rolled. Finally, Maher leaned slightly forward, breaking the tension with a small smile. "Meghan, thanks for doing this." Her response came instantly. "Bill." Just one word. But it landed with the temperature of a glacier. Maher's smile widened slightly. He loved hostile interviews. They were always more honest. "So," he said casually, folding his hands together, "I understand you have some issues with things I've said about you." Meghan didn't blink. "I have issues with a lot of things you've said." Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. "About me. About women. About people trying to make a difference in the world." Maher nodded slowly. "Great." He gestured slightly toward the cameras. "Let's get into it. That's what we're here for." Meghan tilted her head slightly. "Are we?" The question hung in the air. "Because from what I've seen," she continued, "you seem more interested in mockery than conversation." Maher shrugged. "I mock everyone. It's kind of my brand." A pause. "I've mocked presidents, popes, and every political party you can imagine." He leaned back slightly. You're actually in very good company. Meghan's expression hardened. I'm not looking to be in your company. Maher chuckled softly. And yet here you are. A small beat of silence followed. He tapped the arm of his chair thoughtfully. You came to my studio, he continued calmly. On my show. To confront me. He tilted his head. That suggests you care what I think. Meghan's eyes narrowed. I don't care what you think. Another beat. I care about correcting misinformation. Maher raised an eyebrow. Misinformation? Yes. You've called me a professional victim. You said I traded royalty for victimhood. You've implied my experiences aren't real. Maher blinked once. Then shrugged. I didn't say they weren't real. A pause. I said they were, leveraged. The room seemed to grow colder. Meghan leaned forward. That's incredibly dismissive. Maher shook his head. No, his voice was calm. Matter of fact. It's incredibly accurate. A few members of the crew shifted slightly behind the cameras. Even without an audience, the tension in the room was unmistakable. Maher continued, his tone measured. You've done more media interviews in the past 3 years than most celebrities do in a decade. He ticked them off casually. Netflix deals. Podcast deals. Documentaries. A tell-all interview with Oprah Winfrey. He leaned forward slightly. And every one of them centered around the same theme. He paused. How badly you've been treated. Meghan's face flushed slightly. I'm telling my story. Maher nodded. And selling it for millions of dollars. He spread his hands. Which is fine. This is America. A small smile. Capitalism is basically our national religion. Then his voice sharpened slightly. But let's not pretend there isn't a business model involved. The words landed like a match near gasoline. Meghan's shoulders stiffened. You're reducing complex experiences to cynical sound bites. Maher shook his head slowly. I'm describing observable patterns. The room was quiet enough to hear the faint buzz of a camera motor. Maher continued calmly. You can suffer. And also monetize your suffering. He lifted a finger. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Another pause. At some point, the suffering becomes the brand. Meghan stared at him. Her composure held, but barely. You're invalidating my experience. Maher leaned back again. No, I'm contextualizing it. Another beat. There's a difference. The tension in the room was now thick enough to feel. Meghan crossed her arms. So wealth negates suffering. Maher shook his head. No, but it changes the context. He gestured around the empty studio. When someone complains about mistreatment while living in a mansion in Montecito and signing 9-figure media deals, he paused. It lands differently than when someone without those resources says the same thing. Silence. For the first time, Meghan seemed slightly caught off guard. But only for a moment. Then her voice hardened. You're being deliberately reductive. Maher smiled faintly. I'm being deliberately honest. He leaned forward again. That's why people watch this show. Another pause. And it's probably why you're here. Meghan inhaled slowly. The calm she'd entered with was starting to crack. Let's talk about something specific, she said sharply. Maher nodded. Sure. You called my interview with Oprah a masterclass in manipulation. Maher opened his mouth, but before he could respond, the atmosphere in the studio shifted again. Because what happened next was something neither side had planned. And the conversation that followed would push this interview far beyond a simple disagreement. It would turn into a confrontation neither of them would walk away from the same way. And within minutes, one of them would be walking out. The silence after Meghan's words felt almost electric. You called my interview with Oprah a masterclass in manipulation. For a moment, no one moved. The cameras continued their silent sweep across the studio floor, capturing every detail, the tightening of Meghan's jaw, the slight lift of an eyebrow from Bill Maher, the faint shift of a crew member adjusting a lens in the background. Maher leaned back slightly in his chair, as if settling in for a long conversation. I did say that, he admitted. His tone was calm. Almost casual. But the calmness made the words feel sharper. Meghan leaned forward. So explain it. Maher studied her for a moment before responding. You want the honest answer. Her response came instantly. That's why I'm here. Maher gave a faint smile. Well, the interview with Oprah Winfrey wasn't just storytelling. He paused. It was positioning. Meghan's eyes flashed. Positioning? Maher nodded slowly. Yes. Strategic positioning. He gestured slightly with one hand. You framed yourself in a way that made criticism almost impossible. The temperature in the room seemed to drop again. How exactly? Meghan asked, her voice tightening. Maher leaned forward now, his tone more deliberate. You introduced extremely serious accusations, racism, cruelty, emotional harm, but in a format where no one could question them in real time. He tilted his head. That's not an interview. That's narrative control. Meghan blinked once. You think I controlled Oprah? Maher shrugged. No, I think you understood the environment perfectly. A faint hum from the studio lights filled the pause between them. Maher continued. You knew millions of viewers would be watching. You knew people would feel sympathy. And you knew any pushback afterward would look cruel. His voice softened slightly. It was very effective. Meghan stared at him. That's an accusation. No, Maher replied calmly. It's an observation. The tension thickened. Behind the cameras, one of the producers shifted uneasily. Even without an audience, the energy in the room felt volatile. Meghan crossed her arms. You're reducing years of trauma to a media strategy. Maher shook his head slowly. No, I'm saying trauma and strategy can exist at the same time. Another pause. Hollywood runs on storytelling. You know that better than most. Her voice sharpened. You think my experiences were scripted? Maher raised a hand slightly. I think some of them were dramatized. The word landed like a small explosion. Meghan's expression hardened. That's insulting. Maher didn't react. You asked for honesty. He leaned back again, calm as ever. And honesty doesn't always feel flattering. For a moment Meghan seemed to consider her next move carefully. Then she changed tactics. You've also suggested, she said slowly, that I use accusations of racism as a shield. Maher nodded. Yes. And you stand by that? I do. The room fell silent again. Even the crew seemed frozen. Meghan's voice dropped. That's a serious accusation. Maher's tone didn't change. So is racism. Another pause. Then he continued. And real racism absolutely exists. He spoke carefully now. But when every criticism gets labeled racist, people stop listening. Meghan's eyes widened slightly. You're blaming me for that? Maher spread his hands. I'm saying you've contributed to it. Her voice rose. That's absurd. Maher remained calm. Is it? He leaned forward again. How many people now hear the word racism and immediately question it? How many legitimate victims struggle to be believed because the term has been overused? The question hung in the air. Meghan shook her head slowly. You're twisting reality. Maher's expression stayed neutral. I'm analyzing patterns. The studio lights cast long shadows across the floor. And for the first time since entering the room, Meghan looked slightly unsettled. But only for a moment. Then she fired back. "You've spent decades insulting people and calling it commentary." Maher nodded. "That's accurate. And you think that makes you brave?" Maher smiled faintly. "No, I think it makes me honest." Another pause. And honesty isn't always comfortable. Meghan exhaled sharply. "You know what your real problem is?" Maher tilted his head. "Tell me." "You confuse being contrarian with being correct." The words echoed slightly in the quiet studio. Maher considered them. Then he nodded slowly. "That's partially fair." He leaned forward again. "But here's the difference. I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong." He looked directly at her. "Are you?" The question hit harder than anything else he'd said. For a split second, Meghan had no immediate response. The cameras caught it. A flicker of hesitation. Maher noticed it too. "You've explained things," he continued calmly. "You've justified things. You've contextualized things. But I've never heard you say you were wrong." Her jaw tightened. "That's not true." "Really?" Maher asked quietly. "Name one time." The silence stretched longer now. Uncomfortable. Heavy. And suddenly Meghan pushed her chair back. The sound scraped loudly across the studio floor. The crew froze. Maher didn't move. "This was a mistake," Meghan said sharply. Maher looked up at her calmly. "Probably." She grabbed her purse. "But not for the reasons you think." Meghan's eyes flashed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Maher sighed slightly. "You came here thinking you'd confront me. You thought I'd apologize." He shrugged. "But I don't apologize for opinions I can defend." Meghan's voice rose. "You're a bully." Maher shook his head. "I'm a skeptic." He gestured lightly toward her. "You're a powerful public figure. You have enormous platforms, enormous influence. And when someone with that much power claims constant victimhood," he paused. "Questions are fair." Meghan stared at him. "I'm not powerful." Maher blinked. "You're sitting in a studio owned by HBO discussing global headlines about your life." He raised an eyebrow. "You're powerful." She turned toward the exit. "This interview is over." Maher didn't stand. He simply watched. "You came here for a confrontation," he said quietly. "Now you're leaving when it doesn't go your way." Meghan stopped at the door. For a moment, it looked like she might turn back. But pride won. "This isn't over," she said coldly. Maher shrugged. "It never is." And then she walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft but final click. The interview had lasted 19 minutes. But its aftermath was only beginning. Because what happened next would send shockwaves through television, social media, and millions of viewers around the world. For several seconds after the door closed, the studio remained silent. No one spoke. The cameras were still rolling. And Bill Maher sat alone in his chair. He exhaled slowly. "Well," he finally said. "That went about as expected." A few crew members exchanged glances behind the cameras. Maher turned slightly toward the lens. "For the record," he continued calmly, "I invited her here for a genuine conversation." He shrugged. "I thought maybe we'd find some common ground." He paused. "Apparently not." The interview aired exactly as it happened. Unedited. HBO made the decision within hours. And the response was immediate. Social media exploded. Some viewers praised Maher for refusing to back down. Others accused him of being unnecessarily harsh. Supporters of Meghan Markle called the interview hostile and disrespectful. Critics said she had walked into a debate she wasn't prepared for. Within hours, hashtags were trending worldwide. Commentators dissected every moment. Every expression. Every sentence. And Meghan's team responded quickly. A formal statement appeared the next morning. They described the interview as a disappointing example of bad faith discourse. They accused Maher of entering the conversation with predetermined hostility. Maher addressed it on the next episode of Real Time with Bill Maher. The studio audience had returned. And the crowd buzzed with anticipation. Maher sat behind his desk, glancing at the camera with a familiar smirk. Apparently, he began, asking questions is now considered bad faith. The audience laughed. And apparently, he continued, not apologizing for your opinions is considered hostility. More laughter. Maher shrugged. Look, she came on my show specifically to confront me about things I've said. I explained those things. She didn't like the explanation. So now I'm the villain. He paused. But here's the interesting part. At no point did she actually refute anything I said. The audience murmured. She just didn't like hearing it. Maher leaned back. That's the world we live in. Disagreement is violence. Questions are harassment. And refusing to back down makes you a bully. The audience laughed again. Maher smiled slightly. I've been called worse by better people. He paused. Then his tone shifted. Here's the thing about Meghan Markle. He spoke more thoughtfully now. I think she's had some genuinely difficult experiences. The audience quieted. I also think some criticism directed at her has been unfair. But I also think she's made it nearly impossible to separate legitimate grievances from media strategy. Maher spread his hands. And both of those things can be true. The camera zoomed in slightly. She expected me to back down. I didn't. She expected an apology. I won't give one. He shrugged again. That's the whole story. Maher looked directly into the camera. I'm not saying I'm right about everything. I'm saying I'm honest about what I think. And that honesty, whether people loved it or hated it, was exactly why millions kept watching. The interview lasted 19 minutes. But the debate it sparked lasted far longer. Commentators argued. Fans fought in comment sections. And the internet kept replaying the same question again and again. Was Maher too harsh? Or did Meghan walk into a fight she wasn't ready for? The answer depended entirely on who you asked. But one thing was undeniable. For 19 minutes, two of the most controversial voices in modern media collided on camera. And neither one backed down. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, drop your opinion in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more explosive celebrity confrontations and behind-the-scenes moments. Because sometimes, the most unforgettable television isn't planned. It just happens.